All right, let's get into it. Today, we're unpacking one of Shakespeare's heaviest hitters, Othello. If you're gearing up for an exam, or you just want to get your head around this incredible play, you're in the right place. We're going to break down the tragedy, the tools Shakespeare uses, and the big ideas you need to analyze it like a pro. Everything really boils down to this one question, right? It's asked late in the play when everything is falling apart. How does this guy, Othello, this celebrated general who the government itself calls all in all sufficient, just completely unravel? How does the hero become the villain of his own story? That's the puzzle we're going to solve today. So, where do we even begin with a question that big? Well, the first layer we have to peel back is the genre itself. Before anything else, Othello is a classical tragedy. And you know what? That genre has its own rulebook, and it sets up some pretty clear expectations right from the start. The second you realize you're watching a tragedy, you know one thing for sure. The hero is toast. It's not a spoiler, it's just how it works. This feeling that the ending is inevitable is a huge part of the experience. The real question isn't if Othello is going to fall, but how he's going to get there. And man, just how bad it's going to be when he hits the bottom. And every one of these tragic heroes has an Achilles heel, what the ancient Greeks called hamartia, a fatal flaw. For Othello, it's jealousy, a deep, corrosive jealousy that's like a tiny crack in his character. And the villain, Iago, he doesn't just see that crack. He wedges his fingers in there and pries it wide open, pouring poison in until Othello just shatters. And this is what makes tragedy so brutal. There's almost always this moment of horrifying clarity for the hero. It's called anagnorisis. It's when they finally see the truth, the whole awful picture of what they've done. But it always comes too late to fix anything. It's that final, gut-wrenching twist of the knife. Okay, so we know what a tragedy is. But if you really want to ace that essay, you have to talk about how Shakespeare makes us feel all of this. So let's pop the hood and look at the specific tools, the language, the structure that he uses to build this incredible sense of impending doom. And listen, this right here is the absolute secret sauce for your essays. Examiners don't want a book report. They know what happens. They want to know that you know how Shakespeare's choices, his words, the play's structure, create meaning and affect the audience. Focusing on that how and why is what separates a decent answer from a brilliant one. Want to see a perfect example? Check out this number. 52. What on earth could that possibly mean in the world of Othello? That's the number of times the word honest appears in the play. And here's the kicker. It's usually Othello using it to describe Iago. Iago, the slimiest, most dishonest character you can imagine. Every time Othello says honest Iago, it's like a punch to the gut for us in the audience because we know the truth. It's a masterclass in dramatic irony. So how do we know Iago's true nature? He tells us. That's what a soliloquy is. It's when a character turns to the audience and just spills their guts. Iago is constantly letting us in on his evil schemes. And think about what that does. Shakespeare isn't writing a mystery novel. He's letting us in on the horrible secret, so we have to sit there and watch helplessly as Othello walks straight into the trap. And it's not just the words. The very shape of the play is a trap. Think of it like a pressure cooker. It's a tight five-act structure. The setting literally gets smaller and smaller as we go, from the big city of Venice down to an island, and finally it all ends in a single bedroom. There's no comic relief, no subplots to let off steam. Shakespeare is locking us in this claustrophobic nightmare right alongside Othello. Speaking of that claustrophobic world, Venice and Cyprus aren't just pretty backdrops. No way. They are active forces in this story. To really get this play, you have to add another layer to your analysis and understand what these places represent. So, you've got two versions of Venice. First, there's the myth, this perfect, orderly republic built on reason and law. But then there's the reality Shakespeare shows us, which is a lot messier. It's a society that's making some questionable calls, and it has this reputation for loose morals. And that is exactly the weapon Iago uses to poison Othello's mind against his Venetian wife, Desdemona. And then, bam, the story shifts to Cyprus. This is a huge change. We've gone from the supposed center of civilization to a tense military outpost on the front lines of a war. The rules are different here. It's a place of chaos and danger, and that makes everyone, especially Othello, way more vulnerable to Iago's manipulation. Othello himself says it best right here. A drunken brawl breaks out among his own soldiers, and he basically yells, "What's wrong with you people? Have we become the very monsters we're supposed to be fighting?"
In the chaos of Cyprus, you can see the line between us and them starting to completely fall apart. The war out there is becoming a war in here.
And this idea of the enemy within brings us to our final and maybe most powerful layer of analysis, Othello's identity as an outsider. To really unpack this, we can use a modern critical lens to explore the massive themes of race and otherness that are just buzzing under the surface of this entire play.
A really key concept here is Orientalism. It might sound academic, but the idea is simple. It's when a Western culture creates a simplified, often negative, stereotype of a non-Western culture to make them seem exotic, inferior, and ultimately controllable. And Othello, the Moor, is dropped right into the middle of this dynamic.
And you can see it plain as day in the language people use to talk about him, right from scene 1. I mean, look at this stuff. He's not a man, he's an animal, a stereotype, even the devil. Before he really gets a chance to define himself, society has already put him in a box labeled other. And it's a box he can never truly escape. This quote from the critic Anya Lumba just nails it. She says Othello starts out playing by their rules, trying to be a perfect Venetian citizen. But the more Iago works on him, the more he's pushed to the edges, until he eventually becomes the very racist stereotype that Venetian society was afraid he was all along. So, okay, we've looked at this play as a tragedy, we've examined Shakespeare's craft, and we've applied a post-colonial lens. Now for the million-dollar question. How do you take all these ingredients and bake them into a brilliant essay? Here's a simple 3-step recipe for you. First, start with the form. Talk about the mechanics of tragedy, the irony, the language. Then, broaden up to the context. Discuss how the settings of Venice and Cyprus actually drive the action. And finally, apply that critical lens. Bring in the big ideas about race and otherness to show you understand the deepest themes. Follow those steps, and you're not just writing an essay, you're building a truly sophisticated argument. So I'll leave you with this final thought to wrestle with. Is Othello's downfall just the result of his own personal flaw, his jealousy? Or is he the victim of a society that was happy to use his talents, but was never ever going to truly see him as one of them?